So where are you right now?
Krakow.
Ah, okay.
Oh, that's kind of
No,
confusing.
no, yeah, no. My
Crocky.
parents were there like a
We need.
month ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Oh, I'm here often.
Oh,
So,
okay.
we've got a little shop here in Krakow, and then I'll usually hop over onto the Ukraine side. I used to fly into Lviv normally, or Kiev, and then Ivano-Frankivsk in Ukraine. But of course, since the invasion started, I can't fly anywhere in there. Or I imagine you could, but you get shot down by some wandering drone. So now I will fly into Krakow. I have flown into Rzeszów, which is just a little closer to the border before, but I'll typically go to Krakow, spend a week with a team here, and then, maybe hop into Ukraine for a while and do a week there. We'll see how things go, but yeah, so Krakow, I know it too well. It's kind of like a Disneyland city. It's the part of Poland that didn't get bombed during World
Hmm.
War II. And if you go to the old town, it's so prettied up for tourism that it does kind of seem like a fake Disneyland Europe part. Whereas Lviv is the Ukrainian version of Krakow, I would say, and it's more authentic
Hmm.
European. Still kind of that Swedish architecture, but
Is
different.
it still
I
yesterday
prefer it
today
more.
there, or is it
Yeah, for you, yeah,
okay?
because you're what? You're
Yeah,
Friday,
I think it's your
right?
birthday here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. So, but we're still behind. So in Austin, it's like 3 or 4 in the morning or
Yeah.
something.
Are you adjusted? How long you been there?
Uh, no, I'm not adjusted. But that's what last night I had to do a separate podcast that I was a
Hmm.
guest on, and it didn't start until 11 o'clock at night, and I was like jet lagged and just out of it.
That'd be a good
So
one. You
so
have to
that
send
one
me the
went.
link.
Yeah, exactly. That one's a bunch of rambling. And then so tonight I saw where our normal schedule was like for
Yeah.
1. I was like, I'm not gonna. I was like, I hope. Chances are I'll be awake though, but I'm like, I hope I'm not, because if I am, I'm gonna be totally delirious by 1 a.m. So that's why I was like, can we switch it to be a little earlier? So yeah, yeah. But all right, I'll kick
Yeah.
us off. Welcome to the conversation where we unpack the wild, interconnected chaos shaping the world, including the population's decline and all the reasons for it. Your host, Joe Edgar and Ethan Kroc. And today's conversation follows some of the news that Jimmy Kimmel was fired and rehired. And really the question of how does government play a role in our media? When Trump was running for office, he vowed to end media censorship. And then, right after getting to office, one of the first things they did was ban the Associated Press from the White House. And Carolina Levitz has, made comments in regards to the press room that they now want to invite influencers, YouTubers, and the like. And the number of applications for getting into what is called the White House Press Pool is now over 11,500 applications. And that is really opening it to those everyday common bloggers. So most of the conversation today is about, managed media. And I know Australia has some stuff going on right now that's not directly germane, or not
No,
directly related, but is
they
germane
got a
to it.
clever way of doing it. So right now, we recently voted in a digital ID to help the control of information, and it doesn't come. It's not presented that way. It's presented as a way to censor, like not censorship. What was the FAA supposed to do? Like, it's supposed to like make sure that there's no violent or extreme content or something like that. I guess in a way, it's
Right.
basic censorship. So there's still
Right.
censorship. But what the digital ID means is that if you're going to use a computer to access information, you're going to need to do it and let the government know who you
Oh,
are.
wow.
Yeah, and they
So we're not talking like an
no,
app that has your
no,
ID on it. We're talking about you now have to have a digital
it's
fingerprint for everything
soft
you
it's
do
a soft
online.
rollout. So they're calling it voluntary because you could choose not to use the computer for certain services. And so as long as they got a shop front, you know what I mean, they can
You can use it. You can use it like a word processor, or you need your digital ID. Is that
Well,
the
it's like
difference?
that's how they got away with. I don't know what they did in the States, but here they made vaccines mandatory, like federally, like everywhere.
Right.
Like no government, no federal government would say they did that, but there was not a state in Australia that you could go into a shop without having proof of a
Yeah.
vaccine.
Yeah. The U.S. was similar. It wasn't a
So it
required
wasn't
law, but
mandatory, but
if
if
you
you
were
wanted
gonna
to use
do
the
any, like,
services or go to the shops or buy
exactly.
groceries,
In fact, for me to fly to Europe, they're like, get the vaccine, otherwise you can't.
yeah,
So
100%. So they're
I
doing
I
that with
did
digital ID now, and the guise is to protect teenagers, which makes kind of sense because we are in an age of information. And
kids. We have to
well,
save kids. It's always in the name
what
of
I'm saying
children.
is I can understand both sides of it. This is one where I'm not on the offense, but this is one where it's an obvious. Both sides will never see that they could be wrong because there's really value to both sides. We didn't have telephones until we were adults. We didn't have that.
Yeah, but remember those days when you could do prank calls
Yeah,
and no one knew who you were? And then all of a sudden they invented caller ID and it was like, this is terrible.
yeah, but
So you'd prank someone and immediately you'd get a call back, like, let me talk to your parents. You're like, oh,
yeah.
this is not working out. Okay, your fridge is not running.
Well, so do you remember the day when you wanted to look something up and you had to go browse someone's library shelf? Like, so
Right.
the problem is, or if you wanted to watch something, if you wanted to find some porn, you had to steal it from a magazine. Where do you get it as a kid, right? Like, so the thing
Right.
is for kids, they can access anything on the internet. I think even Pornhub doesn't really have a block. It's like a virtue code or on a code. You press the button whether you're 18 or not. So if a kid knows that they're not 18, I guess they're not going to press that button.
Oh, do they do that? In order to get into the porn
I
sites, you
think
have to
that's all that
be
there
an
is. I think
age.
that, well, when I go on there, that's all there is. I don't know if it's different for a kid using the site. So,
Right.
but it will
Right.
be, right? And so now the government wants to know what I'm
Right.
watching as well.
So just to be clear, this will be similar to our Google login. So if
Yeah,
you're on a Google thing, you would log in, your browser would be
yeah.
your authenticated ID. And now, everything you do, it kind of follows you around. You have an ID. So you wouldn't have to check in with your ID. So in some ways it'd be
Well, so and
convenient because now you're like, oh, it's me, I'm old
that's how
enough.
people will accept it. Because if everything's going to go digital, if we're going to have UBI at some point, if everything's going to go that way, even with government services, they're really pushing for the digital, and it works with your ID. It works with going. Eventually, you won't have to sign into anything or get an ID check anywhere. You'll just get retina scanned or whatever, and you'll be in the system. So it just makes sense.
And where you're saying it relates is really if I have that, then on my social media, I know Twitter is full. I love looking at Twitter because I get all these followers. I swear almost 100% of all my new followers, I'm either like the finest piece of me
Yeah,
out there or they're all Russian bots
yeah.
because every single one of them is the exact same layout. It's some gorgeous woman and she's in like a bathing suit pose. And then you click on it and the first pictures are just her posing and no one uses Twitter for that reason. And so I can tell immediately, like they're just Russian bots. So I'm very popular in the Russian bot space. Almost all of my followers seem to be them, at least all the newest ones. So in this case, it would really do away with most of the bot world because now you'd say, okay, on social media, you are you.
Yeah, I could see them. This is a Trojan horse, though, like everything else, like the FAA. It's created to protect the general population, but it can also be used to then control the flow of information again. And not just that, it can be used to track what people are watching and what they're liking, what they're being influenced by, which is a big thing. And you go back to the White House, like the reason why they've cut out the media is because the media has lost all trust and there's a vacuum of information. And that's why it's being filled with podcasters and influencers. And the White House used that to get elected. So they're going to continue to use that. They think that's the secret weapon. That's the secret sauce right now. To try and control because if everything's out there, as long as their story's louder and sounds not better, then they win. That's what they think.
And there's a contrast. Like I think of Russia. Russia has RT, which is their state-controlled media source. It's the way of, dispersing mass media to the world. It's all controlled. The message is 100% filtered. And so they control the answer. And in the US, like you said, Trump just ran on the back of a lot of these podcasters and influencers who have more following than most of the, what we'd call the mainstream media, the old school, television shows.
Or at least the paid media. Let's call it the paid media, right? Because a lot of people are getting their information for free now.
Although, let's not be foolish. Joe Rogan is getting paid.
I've never paid for Joe Rogan. I've never paid for Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. I've never paid for Alex Jones.
Gotcha.
So I could get the information for free. Whereas if I want to read an article, even online, I might be able to read maybe one or two for free. And then it's like, if you want to read anything else. But the thing is, I don't want to read the news because even there's 2 articles I've read, I can tell it's bullshit. It's like, no wonder.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest, Ethan. You're not reading anything.
I can't read. I never learned to read.
Actually, there was a stat recently of how many young people don't read anymore. So it is interesting on where people are getting news. I mean, TikTok
I think
and very short sound bites seem to be a new way of finding out about, different
I'm
events.
sure there's certain fonts that only kids see these days, right? Like thumbnail fonts and stuff like that. Everything else, they're like, is that a word? It looks almost like a word.
It's like they have those pitches. They have phones that will ring. They used to, when people had phones that ring, there would be pitches that the older you are, you can't hear it. So the teachers couldn't hear it, but the kids could. It'd be like screeching. But, I don't think anyone turns a sound on anymore. So then let's compare. So Russia's news, which is 100% controlling the answer, in the U.S., which is different than what Australia does, it's sort of just this open for all, right? So they try to say we're transparent. We let everyone in, especially this administration. They're trying to say instead of the paid media, we're including anyone. So podcasters, influencers, everyone. So you would think that those are two contrasting models.
Yeah, so America's a little bit different too.
We'll bring in Australia's
America's
version,
a little bit different too because it is kind of still the land of the free, but it's ironic when you say it. So, because Australia is, I would say we're more controlled with our media. We've got less channels. Government definitely has more swing in what's going to be presented and what's going to be shared and allowed. England's heading that way. Russia, you said, it's all state propaganda. America, this isn't necessarily state propaganda, but most of the money going to the paid broadcasters is coming from either government influence or people who have influence over the government. And so there is a different kind of monster in America altogether because it really is, or it was, I believe it was state propaganda. It just wasn't as obvious because it was coming from private. The media was being created by private companies, but through different NGOs and different, even pharmaceutical companies are not the government, but they have arrangements together. You know what I mean? And that's where censorship comes in, right? And that was happening forever in America. It's just become more obvious with everything becoming more obvious.
So in the US, if you have arrived, if you, one, have bought some type of media. So, this is Bezos, Washington Post. This is
Elon Musk,
Twitter. And
Rupert
you
Murdoch.
bought a rocket ship. Right. Rupert Murdoch. So you either own a media and you own a rocket company, then you have arrived.
Well, then it's like there's a movie, I think it was Kingpin with Bill Murray, and he's a bowler and he just wants to win $1 million. Yeah. And then when he wins and he's like, yes, I'm a millionaire. Finally, I'm above the law. And that is the American dream, right? And so when they talk about all these conspiracy theories, the elite cabal eating babies and, trafficking children, it's all about this idea and concept that in America, as long as you have enough money, you could do what you want. That's the American dream.
Now, some would say that's what's great is we have these billionaires who are able to buy the media because in Australia, you have this propaganda chain. There's one route to it. You don't say anything but that is the source of truth they want you to believe. But of course, what happens is no one ends up trusting it, right? And then here,
no, I think we have more trust in the media here than you do, bro. Like that's why they got 90% of the people here vaccinated. Yeah. Like it's insane.
Well, I think I totally agree with you because there are so many sources, right? So you have these billionaires who can buy up media, but now you have so many different sources of media, all the way down to influencers. In fact, again, Russia was able to buy ads all over Facebook and make articles to whatever your bias you want and put it on whatever .com site, and everybody just bought into it. So here there were just so much available that, people just ran wild with it. So now we have again, so in Russia, no one trusts it because they see it's the controlling propaganda. And here, no one trusts it because there is no source of truth. So now you have two different ways to control or not control media. And yeah, you end up with almost the same result where no one is, trusting the media now.
And so the new way of censorship is this whole suing thing, right? So, and I'll give you an example of this, right? So Trump kind of ran on no censorship in the media. And then as soon as he's in and people start pointing the finger at him and Epstein, anyone that's got, even podcasters that call him out on Epstein, they get a little letter or an email saying, hey, if you don't take down this podcast, we're going to sue you for $1 billion. So there's a new way of creating the censorship.
Well, everyone settled their case soon after he was elected. All of a sudden, everybody's like, let's settle and just pay, Trump. I think of the one word that comes to mind is, a sycophant. The sycophants that literally just go around and are fawning to the president. So it's not that he came in and ultimately controlled them. It's that you have this group who want to kowtow to the president, to where now they're basically doing anything he wants. And in so doing are saying, okay, let's just settle in court, give him all of his money, and we'll censor based on what he says. And I think Jimmy Fallon is a great example of what you're saying because, Brendan Carr, who is the FCC's chairman, he didn't actually do anything other than make comments. And Trump didn't actually do anything other than make comments. But the amount of power that got swung around, you see two executives from Sinclair and Nexstar who own local rebroadcasting stations, who ultimately got angry and said, we don't like what Jimmy Fallon said, so they complained. So then Disney's like, well, this must be the thing to do.
Kimmel, we're saying
so
Jimmy
Disney
Kimmel,
kowtows.
right? Sorry, Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
You said Fallon.
Jimmy Kimmel,
They can be mixed up.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's part of this. That's why I'm getting it mixed up. Exactly. Well, so Kimmel ends up getting, Disney says, okay, we're gonna end this. So Kimmel's out, and so Trump jumps on it and takes total credit for it. And then he says, well, what about Fallon too and NBC? And so he calls for outing more people. So he wants even more broadcasters. He was asked about polling licenses, and he says, anybody who is, against him, he thinks that their license should be pulled. And so all of a sudden he's making comments that are not law. The only executive order he really did was in regards to NPR and other public funding. He pulled those by executive order. He pulled their funding. But he really didn't do anything. The rest of it is really a bunch of sycophants who saw it and said, okay, well, let's give Trump whatever he wants. Brendan Carr literally changes his tone from previous times, and he calls for the duty to protect, is what he says. So a duty to protect the listeners based on what Jimmy Kimmel said. He felt he needed to protect us, which sounds like another name of censorship to me. However, they didn't do anything. They didn't pull any licenses, right? Jimmy Kimmel wasn't arrested. He could have still gone on to, create a Twitter channel or whatever he wanted, a YouTube channel. He could have done something. So
yeah, again,
so it's a strange
it's
censorship.
semantics a lot of the time, right? They're throwing around a lot of semantics.
That's exactly right. So then they ultimately reverse because there was a lot of protesting for Jimmy Fallon. So Disney's like, wait, this is terrible. Their stock price went down by $4 billion. So they reinstate
they upset
Jimmy.
The woke mob.
They reinstate Kimmel.
That is their audience. How do they not know their audience? But anyway, yeah.
The woke finally woke up. So then they put him back in. And then Nexstar, president of Nexstar, and Sinclair, which Sinclair is a family-owned company and very political as well. Both of them say, we're not putting him back on air. they wait and their own constituency protests saying like, why are you blocking our local stations? So then they have now agreed and put Jimmy Kimmel back on. So now he's won this fight. He's back on. Trump was angry and he said it was a terrible decision by Disney. But this lays out something that's interesting, because if you now go back to the White House and who they've allowed into the press pool, by allowing just everyday people who are influencers, doesn't that sort of, I mean, it democratizes the news, but doesn't it allow for a distortion of the news in some regard, because now anybody can disseminate it. But at the same time,
I think what we were seeing before is just an agreed version upon what happened, or an agreed version upon what's happening, where now you've got, as far as influence and podcasters and even news channels now, because they are having to find a new audience or keep their audience, they're going to start tailoring the message slightly different if they want to survive. Like, because the trust is gone in media, people are looking for someone who's going to tell them the other side of the story, or from a different point of view. So I actually think it's going to be a good thing. I think ultimately,
by being a good thing, you mean like opening it up to more types of media to be able to...
I think censorship is always wrong. Like, even if you're trying to protect people, ideas beat ideas. Unless you want to have an IQ test for participating in society, because ideas are killed by truth and discussion and sunlight, and everything needs to be open and discussed, and we can't have anything that's decided for us without being at least aware of how that decision was made.
I mean, I can buy into that. So the more people there are, the more channels you have to ultimately hear the message. It's giving you the choice of different
even
versions.
If I think about even at the way the world is heading, right? Because you're going to have two different. I think it's got to keep splitting this way. You're going to have people prepping, and you're going to have people going full digital ID AI, right? And the digital ID AI they're just going to trust that the digital AI chat is going to take the average opinion of what's out there, and maybe that's going to be the new narrative. And that's probably what we're seeing on learning language models anyway, right? And that will change based on public opinion or information that's released into the public.
Well, really running into that, let's now take it, because now that's taking a whole disseminated, disperse opinion and trying to come up with some kind of norm. But what the White House has done is they allow multiple media sources in.
That's called muddying the waters, though. They do that on purpose too, right? So,
well, they muddy the water, but in Russia, they literally control what the answer is. In the White House, they control who gets to ask the questions.
They've always done that, though, Joe. They've always done that.
It's true.
It just didn't look like that before, because CNN weren't wearing their Democrat badges, but they were all Democrats. Come on,
But
come on.
Yes, they were picking the questions, but let's also be fair in here.
They refused to answer some. They just
kick out
refused to answer
any
some.
press.
There's a difference too. At least Trump has always, even if you don't like his answers, at least he's always answered. The Biden administration got away with clear out.
He hasn't always answered.
Out the room.
Some of his answers have been like, "You're sick. You're disgusting. Okay. I'm meeting with the New Zealand Prime Minister today. I'm going to tell him about your question."
Some of his answers you didn't like, straight up, with not just Biden, even his press secretary straight up refused to even speak words and just walk out of the room. I saw it multiple times because they could not deal with the question. So,
but the question should be allowed still, right?
100%. 100%.
So, but that's what's being filtered now.
But it's not, because if you're watching, by allowing because if you're watching the TV, I watch some TV, and when you watch the TV, anytime they're covering Trump, whenever he talks, they don't even let him talk. They just talk over him and tell you what they think is exactly. They tell you what the story that you want to hear. They
play-by-play commentation.
They answer the question for him. They put words into his mouth every time. And that's what people are eating up and watching and believing. That's the narrative now. And so people that think that Trump told you to put bleach in your veins and shit, like, people believe that because the TV told them that, not because Trump. They never heard Trump say it because Trump didn't say it. I've heard what he said. Yeah, he says stupid shit, but the stupid shit he says, the news can make it sound even stupider by cherry picking it.
I don't know if they can make it worse. I don't know. But yes, everybody can edit something, and make it look a little worse. But he is able, or at least they're attempting.
I hate defending
Trump.
I'm
not saying they're successfully at it.
I hate defending
but
He's an idiot.
This is only new. Ethan. This is new. But by bringing in more media sources, they are trying to ultimately cherry pick the questions that they bring in. So they're wanting to find more people who align them, and they are kicking people out. Associated Press was, kicked out. So they are trying to ultimately control who gets to carry the message and where the message goes. Now, do you think there's a difference between an influencer and a paid media source? Should they be considered equal? Because a paid media source is literally going to have a staff who can verify. And especially under this presidency, it's like, okay, well, what's truth, what's not? Or as an individual like a loomer,
so I think you
are just going to be able to, promote whatever you want.
There's another classification of person that we need to label here, and it's investigative reporter. Because an influencer or a podcaster or a news, even TV comedian, they're not investigative reporters, but a lot of them are responsible for carrying the narrative or telling the story, right? But it's the investigative reporters whose responsibility it is to take the time to search the leads, to find the witnesses, to do the interviews, to gather the data and present the facts. And that's the ultimate, those investigative reporters used to work for media channels, let me finish.
Isn't that what all of them should be?
They all should be, but no, a lot of them, some of them are just trying to get paid. Some of them are just trying to click views. Some of them are trying to get ratings, right? So no, they're not all, some of them, they all claim to be, sure, but they're not all investigative reporters. Okay. And let me give you an example.
But shouldn't all reporters try to be that, though?
They should be. But this is why they stopped before, in the old era, when the narrative was clear. Reporters used to ask the right question in the conference room, because if they didn't, they would be shot. They would be suicided, or they would be found up. They'd be robbed. They literally
by the public, or
by who knows, by random people apparently. And a lot of the time it's suicide. A lot of people say it's the Clintons who killed them. A lot of the people say it's the CIA. But if you look it up, there's a lot of, especially in Washington, there's a lot of journalists that just somehow happen to be the misfortune, or it's a stressful lifestyle or a stressful career move to be a journalist in Washington, or a journalist who reports on Epstein, or a journalist who reports on certain things in the past. That's how they controlled the media in the past. Now they control it through suing. So anytime an investigative journalist in the media tries to release a good story, they'll be sued the shit out of it. Anytime a podcaster or an investigative, they'll get sued the shit out of it. So the only people that are getting exposed are the people who don't matter, because everyone who matters has enough money to be able to buy the influence or pay their way out of and muddy up the water. This is what Trump's doing. Epstein's a really good example of this, because he was going to run on exposing Epstein, right? Kash Patel was going to...
He did run on exposing Epstein.
Okay, and so all these people that are behind Trump, a lot of these people are in these kind of, in intelligence or elite circles. Everyone knew about Epstein. Trump knew about Epstein, right? We don't hear about any of the names of the island because the people who are supposed to be investigating the people on the island were on the island. And we're not going to find out who was on the island, right? And all these influencers and podcasters who were talking about Epstein before Trump was president, they're not talking about him anymore because...
Yeah, it's quiet.
Yeah. So that's censorship, isn't it? It's a clever way of censorship, but it's muddying the waters. And the whole idea is you tell them a little bit of truth. People call them sipes now, but you tell them a little bit of truth, and then you make it go to the most extreme, ridiculous situation. So when people find out what the end of the story is, they can't believe any of it.
So this is really manipulation. Mm-hmm. How do you manipulate?
Everything is.
What people are being heard. So there's manipulation comes in two different ways. Because I would say on the Russian side, it's coercion.
Yeah.
That is their type of manipulation, because they're trying to control the message. So there's like, listen, you will say this. However, we must persuade you. You will agree with this. And then on this side, it's manipulation. And so there could be manipulation from, as I said, the White House trying to control questions. That might be their form of manipulation. You could have very wealthy individuals who have media access. So I personally feel that when Trump was running for election, I was getting bombarded by Musk's tweets. I stopped following him. I kept flagging, like, I don't want to see him. And it was like every other tweet was Musk's tweet supporting Trump. It was just out of control. So even on the Twitter platform, I think there was a lot, going on, even though he was, claimed to have, gone there to protect freedom of speech. But I think giving us too much is another form.
Still censorship.
Of
I've been blocked on Twitter, I don't know, 10 times this year. And then you see people like for silly things that, like, there's no way it should be blocked, but because it's not politically correct or because it's insensitive to a certain group, but then other people can, like, literally call for violent acts and get millions of views and retweets and not a problem. You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
a funny.
Well, I find myself getting revved. So I haven't been blocked yet, but I get revved constantly. So sometimes I'll tweet out and I'm like, wait, there's been 2 views. That's not real. So I do get that. And Elon Musk did tweet about it. He's like, well, those who tweet a lot, you should think about, like, we're only going to, promote your tweets to so far. So if you tweet a lot, then you should get fewer views per one. And so instead of more views for if you tweet only once, that doesn't make sense.
You got to choose your words.
It should be engagement and conversation. So to me, that did sound like, a type of censorship. You have other ways of manipulating. I mean, everybody buys, whether it's Rupert Murdoch and Fox News, all the way down to the Washington Post. Do they have the ability to, influence their own media source? Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and Instagram, they were caught with their hand in the cookie jar. They clearly had to apologize and try to fix some things, saying they literally were censoring during COVID on behalf of the Biden administration. Trump has skipped the White House, the WHCA, the White House Correspondent Dinner, now 3 years in a row. So he's just kind of boycotted that altogether. This is the group that literally reports from the White House, but he wants it made open outside of the press. He thinks it's like this elite circle. So, he's, again, trying to control a message of sorts and know it well. NPR, and try to pull funding from the PBS, public broadcasting stations as well, and saying, that basically accusing them of having a liberal message. And there's more. So manipulation is, Russia has coercion. The U.S. now has what is manipulation. And Australia is popping up with its new form.
They test it here, man. They test it here.
Yeah. It's the new test market of having this verified ID, which is, on Twitter, it's very popular to have lots of unverified accounts. So I do pay Twitter to have my account verified just so I can filter through people who are and aren't, because there are so many bots out there. You have bots that just run millions. So in some ways, I'm like, I would love for everybody to have a verified account. At the same time, though, I don't want it to be forced. It's kind of fun having the bot swing. A forced manner would make people, or actually the question is, would it make people more accountable for what they say? If you are under the guise of an alias, do you feel more free to say something than when it's yourself? And that could be from your job. You're working somewhere and you're like, okay, well, I can't tell everybody I'm a Trump supporter or I'm a Biden supporter, but I still want to promote them. So that could be one where you don't have freedom of speech just because you might get chastised at work or, frowned upon, avoid a promotion, something like that, where it's not, your rights aren't being totally suppressed, but, you feel some pressure. And so there's that argument. But then there's the other side of the argument where you have the right, the freedom of speech, First Amendment. However, it has to be you. So if you are under an alias, your alias doesn't have the freedom of speech. Only you have the freedom of speech. And that can only happen if, you go out and are verified. So if you're willing to stand behind what you say, then you can. So then it comes down to the question of what are our freedom of speeches? I don't know all of Australia's.
We don't have any.
But
I can answer you that. We have none. We're a penal colony. I'm not lying. In our constitution, we do not have the right to free speech.
So the U.S. and England's similar to Australia's, but like the U.S., everyone says, "Oh, First Amendment, I have all the freedoms that I want under the free speech," but it's not necessarily true. There are some limitations, and so some of those limitations, for example, defamation. You're not allowed to do anything that is defaming of somebody else. That goes along with inciting violence. You have a limitation on what you can do for violence. You have commercial. You can't go and say, something's going to do something when it's not going to. So you think through, there are quite a few limitations on what is freedom of speech.
And then there's things that you could say, but you'll still get consequences for. So you might be free to say them, but you still may suffer social consequences or whatever.
Yeah, no, that could be everything from racism to bigotry. I think of, I was just listening to Dave Chappelle the other day. So
to Dave Chappelle.
Hearing some of his stories make me think of, Dave Chappelle's a great example of freedom of speech, but unfortunately, consequences of speech. So, but then under the First Amendment, we also have the freedom of press. Are found in the same sentence. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the press. So speech and the freedom of press are, supported. So attempting to silence the freedom of speech, wouldn't that be going against our First Amendment right? Isn't that what literally they were trying to do? I mean, you think of what access is there. So the access of the White House is Air Force One. The Oval Office, the press room, and then, unfortunately, it's now Truth Social and Twitter, which he will, promote everything on.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like to see much of Trump anyway. So I don't know. It's funny because it sounds like the people that hate Trump are the ones getting mad because they're being left out of the Trump circles. So that doesn't make sense to me. I don't really care how Trump chooses to send his message, but I think his messages are all mixed. I think he sends different messages to different people. And so the different groups then make excuses for why he's so wrong on one thing because he's so right on their thing. And he's just doing that so he could do their thing. Like, I don't know. It comes down to whatever system you're in, it works and it's the right system. And as soon as you are out of that system, you start seeing how that system is corrupt. And that's just everywhere. Like, when I lived in America, you keep talking about Russia being the bad guys. Like, from where I sit now...
I haven't said that yet, but they are the bad guys.
But it doesn't look like it to me, Joe. Like, unfortunately, where I live in Australia, and even when I was living in America, this is why, because I know what it's like to live in America. I don't know what it's like to live in Russia, but having lived in America and having lived in Australia, now everything that I've been told about Russia looks like a lie. And everything I see that's coming from Russia looks very different to what everyone keeps telling me Russia is. So I don't know, because I've never been to Russia, but I can tell you America, there is no freedom of speech. I didn't get it. I was arrested for saying the wrong thing. I was beaten up by the cops for saying the wrong thing. So and that happens to a lot of people that are from different ethnicities, different social classes.
Is it? I mean, you did tell them, come and arrest me.
I told them to fuck off.
I don't know if they...
So apparently that is excluded from freedom of speech in America.
Yes, but it's not so much
I
what
wasn't
you
free
said.
from the consequences.
You told them to do that. And then you threw beer cans at their car.
Shit.
So I don't know if that was equate to...
I would not waste the beer in the can.
Well, you bring up a couple of things that are now interesting. One, it's if we're concerned on what we say now. So if we have so much quote unquote freedom of speech that, maybe the government won't come after us, or there's something out there that we worry about what we say, is there not now a built-in self-censorship?
Yeah.
And is that not also a way of, controlling freedom of speech and thereby the freedom of press? So if you have all these sycophants who want to really kowtow to the president, and so they're going to say and do, he brought all the CEOs together, and all the CEOs, they
just
constantly
brought
are
all the
like, you're
military
so
together.
amazing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they just brought the military together. Well, Hegseth brought them all together to tell them all they have to shave
No
and they're too
ponytails,
fat.
no nails.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird meeting. But in self-censorship, all of a sudden you may question like, oh, if I say anything about the president, this may, get me cut or I could get in trouble or, what happened with Charlie Kirk. All of a sudden there were people going around trying to get people fired for making any comment about Charlie Kirk. So now many might feel they need to self-censor themselves on that topic. And then other topics, they may say, okay, well, there's more now, so I don't really want to talk about this or give out my opinion. Doesn't that stifle freedom of speech as well in all societies? Because this is really where they all come together. This is Australians, where you now are going to have your name behind every comment you make. It's the US, where you can still hide under the guise of some type of alias if you want in some social media, but ultimately you're going to be found out. And then in, of course, Russia, where there's coercion, where you could end up in prison for saying something. But how different are they if people are in fear of what they say? It's all somewhat equal. And how do we basically avoid this self-censorship?
So I guess, like we were talking semantics before, maybe we keep saying censorship and freedom of speech, and maybe they're just extreme unrealities. Maybe they can't exist. For example, like I love free speech, but yeah, like there is, if the speech is harmful, then, what's the value in it, right? And so, but then on the other side of censorship, well, we're going to protect people from speech. Well, who then gets to decide on what should be protected? And so I guess it comes back to you were saying like, I guess the social influence and the self-censoring. I guess when we're judged for our crimes, we go before jury of our peers, or at least that's how it works in our Western countries, right? And so we become judged on the morality of that group.
I picture a whole bunch of, flannel shirt Australians
a lot of
holding
flip-flops.
beer with
There's a lot of flip-flops.
Yeah, mate. Right, mate.
A lot of beers. But anyway, so what I'm saying is like, I think that's how freedom of speech and censorship should ultimately work, is it should be based on the morality of the group. So yeah, sure, we can protect our families and children from what we want them to hear, but we shouldn't be able to impose it on other groups or families or such.
So Pew Institute did a survey last year, and only 16% of people said they trust the media today, which, if you think of a failing grade would be anything below 60%, and 16% is, pretty scary, where how does anyone trust anything? So we have so many different sources of media, and people plug into so many, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a blog. Young people are watching TikTok now. TikTok's about to be owned by a lot of wealthy people, including Larry Ellison. He's going to get his hands on some. So as everyone is there, and you talked about earlier, AI trying to put everything, together of some sorts. On Twitter, everyone, it seems constant. It's like they'll do, Grok, is this true?
Yeah.
And so they're trying to use that as a source. And we talked about this on a different one, where ultimately AI has the potential to be somewhat biased. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But where and how are people going to be able to figure out where they should find their news?
Yeah, so I think that's a question my dad asks me all the time. And I keep trying to tell him.
What do you tell him at the bottom of a beer can?
Yeah, well, no.
Just keep digging. I
tell him that the way I'm doing it now is I'm trying to and I think this is going to be the winner all around. I think the winners in the future, and this will, they'll win because what they're saying ends up matching reality. So I haven't seen any major news outlet report on anything of substance in the last at least 6 years and be correct about it. And so I think once you start finding, I've found some sources that, are correct more often than not. And then the times that they're wrong, they explain that they were wrong and why they got it wrong, and those are the kind of sources that I continue to watch and follow. And I think that, that's why I'm saying I'm not afraid of more choices, because eventually I'm going to find the one that resonates with me and I feel like I can trust it again. And maybe that's what Trump's doing with all these different new platforms, is he's throwing just spaghetti all across the kitchen, and wherever the spaghetti sticks, that's what he'll then put all the juice in. That's what they do in scientific fields. That's what they do in, any industry, right? Sometimes you got to throw the spaghetti out.
Well, they're trying to uncover some ultimate science, whereas I don't think this relates to the same thing. But I hear all the time people will say, well, do your own research, you got to research. And it's such an easy phrase to say, but it is so hard to actually do your research. I found a link the other day that someone was sharing, again, back to Twitter, but they were sharing a Gemini link, and it was in regards to inflation. So U.S. and historical inflation, it was a debate about the rising and falling prices of real estate and blah, blah, blah. But they added this link to inflation. When I clicked on it, it said exactly what I was saying the inflation was. And then he's like, no. And he took a screenshot of what he clicked on it, and it did. And I was like, what? So I started clicking it. Every time I clicked on it, it gave a different answer.
Yeah.
It was pretty surprising that this Gemini link, it seemed like it had 4 answers, and every time you clicked on it,
so that's obviously not a trusted source thing. So this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. Like, it's got to be, maybe it is hard, but the alternative was you weren't getting the true information in the past. So, you can still get the false information. You can still subscribe to the narrative, but yeah, if you want.
But then half of the reason we put together this is because we talk to lots of people who don't spend much time, quote unquote, researching anything. And you and I will spend above the average time actually trying to find some source of something, even though we know, like, it may not be the truth, but at least we have multiple reputable sources now
there's more
saying
answers.
This is going in that direction.
We're looking for more data
points.
It's
going like
we're
this.
looking for more data points.
Right. So the point that fewer and fewer people are doing, quote unquote, research, and yet wanting to have an answer hungry at the tip of their tongue, but they're digging for it, and they're really being sold for their own bias. So this goes to the opposite. This is one where it's not self-censorship. It's really selective censorship, because they're wanting to believe in their own bias. It's the same thing that Russia did to Facebook when they basically made articles that sold anything. And so all of a sudden people are sharing these articles that sold to their bias, and it just, grew like wildfire. Like, oh, read it. It's true. See, it is happening. The government's censoring. Or, they are, forcing vaccines on people, or whatever article they wanted to, promote. It sold right to their narrative, and they loved it. So we have this weird bias built in that wants to, find an article that backs up whatever we think.
Or whatever we've been programmed
for it. We've been
programmed too, right?
Programmed. It's known as selective bias, right? That's the term for it. So the selective bias means we're looking for something that justifies our own bias, instead of looking at something and reading it and then trying to come out with a conclusion. We're actually trying to find something that,
and then the opposite of that
makes it sound like
the opposite of that is sometimes people can't just comprehend the data or information, and that's cognitive dissonance, right? There might be something they might be ignorant of, because in their version of reality, they have an answer for that already. And so whatever information you're presenting now, that can't replace my answer. And so I don't understand what you're saying. Does that make sense?
I only have eyes for you.
And so that's probably a lot of these Trump influencers, why they don't connect some of these dots, is their cognitive dissonance.
This is like beer goggles for news.
Yes, beer goggles for news.
So then how do we do this? Because this allows for such an opportunity for manipulation, because people are going out of their way to manipulate themselves and their own bias. So now you're going to follow a candidate that chants your own bias. And it could be, not to mock last week's episode, but it could be like chemtrails. We're going to stop all these chemtrails that are polluting the whole world, even though it's been very clear there are not massive chemtrails going around. But to run on this bias, this could win a lot of people because it resonates. People are like, yeah, the government are doing are dumping chemtrails everywhere. I got to follow this guy. This guy's good. And then you have a president who stands up and is like, it's huge. We're going to stop him. It's huge. It's huge.
I don't know.
So how ultimately do we get past our own bias to be willing to reason?
I don't know if it's as big a problem maybe as we consider, because I don't know the answer, but I know what's going to happen. I know everything's going to just go back to a class system. Like not ever.
You mean the elite and the working class?
Yeah, because not even that. Maybe IQ based. Maybe in the past it's been strength based. No, I'm serious. Maybe in the past it's been physicality based. The biggest man with the biggest muscles, the biggest country, the biggest guns.
I don't think that happened.
But now it's going to be the IQ. It's going to be whoever can interface better with the machines is going to be Terminator. So
you're talking about robots will be running around and whoever can really run the robots.
Not just robots.
So it'll be Elon against everybody.
Not just robots. So I'm actually starting to lean towards more your side. I don't know if they'll actually ever get to super intelligence. I don't think it's impossible.
The dark side.
I think it's impossible. I think they're getting so close that they think it's possible, but they don't realize that it's that final step that's going to be the hardest, that they just won't be able to, that's not possible. And they won't know until they get there, right? Because there's so many problems to solve on the way and they think they're getting so close. But yeah, I think ultimately there won't be any super AGI. And so it'll always be humans using technology to improve human intelligence, because we won't be able to create anything smarter than ourselves. So it'll always be us trying to boost our own intelligence. And like,
how are we doing that? Because this next generation that is coming
that's what I'm saying. Because you still think that we didn't need populations. We don't. They want to get rid of the populations. And that's what I'm saying. It's going to be class. They're going to be like termites. They're going to be like part of the earth that like moves the dirt.
So the younger generation are the ones that are going to be the working class, because they don't move dirt very well.
They're going to die, Joe. They're going to die. They're going to die.
Trying to get them to do anything.
They're going to die in wars, in famines. They're going to die when they can't get food because their digital ID is off, because there's a bloody blackout, because the sun's been down for 3 days and everything's on fucking solar. They're trying to squeeze the population on purpose. There's a reason why the population is declining. Like, somehow, when I was growing up, it was going like this, and it's like going straight up, and now it's going straight down. That doesn't happen by accident.
No, people don't have babies.
But they're not having babies on accident. My government just got exposed just recently for a bunch of government programs that are creating material to try and convince people not to have children.
Oh, really? I haven't read about this.
I'll have to find this.
All states are trying.
That might be another episode.
All states are really moving towards trying to convince people to have children. Might be another episode.
Like, so it adds to to the fear mongering of the people that think we're being replaced on purpose, right? If the government is saying we need to immigrate all these people to create our numbers, and at the same time they're telling the people that live here don't have any more babies, that's diluting the population, isn't it?
Well. So let's get into that, because that's kind of the full story, right? And if the full story is complicated, it seems like it doesn't get out very well. Last night on the podcast I was on, the girl interview, I can't even remember what it was, but we ended up talking about the Ukraine invasion.
It wasn't a bot. It was a real person, was it?
Yeah, right. It was probably a bot.
Bot.
I wouldn't know.
They look good in those bikinis.
Once I start talking, I'm not even. Exactly. There's just a still shot of her doing this, and that's it. I was just like, yes. I talked to her for 5 hours last night.
She sounded Asian though,
and she just kept repeating, "Oh, this is amazing. What you're saying." No. Yeah, self-bias. However, social media has made it these little sound bites. So now news doesn't come in a full story; it comes in a small little sound bite. And these sound bites are subject to manipulation as well. You're only hearing a part of the story. You're not getting the whole thing. However, there's another side that has happened, and long-run podcasts. So podcasts that run 3-4 hours have become popular. And so in these ones, you can sit down with someone and interview things until it's just beat to death. And so there's two different ends, and I couldn't find a lot of data on who and what are doing it. The closest thing I could do is I could find white males seem to really love listening to things about World War II. I don't understand it. I don't love World War II, but for some reason, white males love World War II.
I think it's our ancestry, right? Because we won, because we think we won that, right? But like our parents, our grandparents were involved in that. It's something that rings dear.
They can relate to. They're like, finally, I'm not a bad guy.
Well, I know.
We won.
I always grew up thinking that because my grandfather went and fought in 2 tours, that's why I'm not speaking Japanese. But I could be wrong.
It's definitely interesting. There's so many things happening, and it does set really well this ID that Australia is bringing around. Ukraine has a digital ID, but not like what you're talking about. There's an app you open it and have your passport.
That is ours as well. That is ours as well.
Right.
It's just, and that's what I'm saying. Like all of the ways that it's been rolled out is so convenient and clever that it's a no-brainer. Right. And it's only people who are outside of the system that are like, wait a second, this is the same country that censored us only a couple of years ago when they didn't even check. They didn't even bother to check. Like you were saying, they were just reading the best headlines from the US and saying this magic stuff is going to work, and so, and these magic rules,
Google,
the magic arrows on the ground are going to work.
When I use Google, sometimes I am appreciative of it, where it'll give me gift ideas. It's watching me so closely. It knows my schedule. It knows when somebody's birthday is coming up. And all of a sudden it'll start giving me gift ideas. I'm just like, Google, thank you. Like I love this. This is great. And I'm
not even a thoughtful person.
I know I'm being watched constantly. It makes me a better person. It makes me look like a better person. But if it was the government doing this, all of a sudden I get a creepy feeling going up my back. Like if the government were the one who is controlling all this, even though I know all this data is running through some data center in Utah being held by the NSA. But nonetheless, for some reason, when Google's doing it, I find it convenience, even though it's kind of creepy. I'm like, yeah, link to my phone, link to my computer. You make it more safe. You make it more secure. And then all of a sudden, when I hear a government could be doing that, I do get a whole different strange feeling. Like all of a sudden, I don't have the will to leave it. I'm stuck in there forever, and I can't unsubscribe and turn it off. And that feeling, does bring me some, great concern, because there's a lot you can do if you have ultimate data on any individual.
I think it's because, Joe, there's never accountability in government. Like in private industry, when they get caught doing something, they go to jail. They get fined. That big things happen. I've seen some big names go to jail or pay some, amazing amounts of money. And yet,
when they throw beer cans at the cop car.
And yet when the government does anything, first of all, they lie.
Run down the street without your clothes on.
First of all, the government will go down like to the death lying about what's happened. And then when they finally do get caught, okay, well, you got me. Let's move on. You know what I mean? Like, there's no accountability.
The Epstein files as an example. Epstein files as an example. Patel, Bondi, Trump.
When they break laws, like they tried to arrest Trump for breaking laws. How many politicians have broken laws before Trump? They don't get arrested. You don't arrest politicians. They even argue about whether a politician can break the law. They literally argue about, no, you can't even legally arrest a president or a sitting president or a retired president. That's bullshit. A law's a law. Like, come on.
Right.
Anyway.
Right. Leave us, since you're in Australia and you're being censored, leave us with some words of wisdom for us Americans to either avoid or to jump head deep into the censorship.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, everyone in America needs to stop the hyperbole on censorship.
Oh, I'm going to cut you off there just for censorship's sake.
Because I don't see the censorship that everyone's screaming about, because if you're being censored, we wouldn't know about you being censored. So I'm a champion of free speech. I love, definitely, if you want to see your heroes on TV, let your networks know that you want to see them, but you watch them as well. And if they get bad ratings, don't cry because they're not there, or go find them on YouTube. to me, it's not a big deal. It's a big deal if there was true censorship. If Jimmy Kimmel was not just fired, but he was not allowed to publicly make statements, if he had to go to prison and could only speak through a lawyer, like that's censorship. And I'm sure they do that in some places. So I think that's definitely something we should avoid. I'm a firm believer in free speech, but also, yeah, let's let the morality of the populace control what levels of censorship. Let's not let a small group at the top tell us what we can and can't think and talk about.
You heard it here, folks. Hostile dysfunction, where we unpack the interconnected chaos shaping the world and all the reasons for it. Until next time, we'll talk to you all later.
That was all right.